Welcome back, everyone. The next topic is what we all have been waiting for, the medical terminology. In this chapter, we are going to look at some of the ways to study the medical terminology that we need to know when we are interpreting. We will look at some root words, we will revisit the register and circumlocution, the picture words, and lastly, I will wrap this chapter up with some common misconception and confusion that I have learned from my past experience. Before we begin, I actually want to tell you something first. This is one of my favorite quotes, and when it comes to training other interpreters or teaching other students, if you give someone a fish, you feed them for a day. But if you teach someone to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. This medical terminology or medical knowledge, there is not even a single way that I can cover all of them. No matter how much time and effort I spend, I will not be able to just teach you everything. In fact, I don't even know everything. But what I can do is to teach you how to learn, how to study, so that you can keep building yourself as a professional interpreter. No matter what I do, I cannot make that happen for you. If there is someone who says, oh, if you take my lecture once, you will become a professional interpreter and you will stay that way forever. If anybody says that, trust me, that's just scam. Please have this in mind as we go through this chapter together. I'm not here to feed you food. I'm here to show you how to eat yourself, so you can do things when I am not there. Understood? Let's get that started. Prefix, root word, and suffix. When it comes to learning medical terminology, I cannot think of a better way to learn than learning this. Remember what a urinalysis was? We talked about this before, more specifically when we were talking about the register. So what's a urinalysis? It's the urine test, right? It's a medical test of your urine sample. If you look at this word urinalysis, you will see that it has the uri or urea portion, which is the prefix, meaning that it has something to do with the urine or your urinary tract. I believe I showed you this example. The word is hematuria. Do you remember what this was? The term urea we just covered, in this case, is being used as a suffix. And now the prefix hemat. Hemat means something that has to do with your blood. What's a blood doctor? A hematologist. As you can see, many of these medical terminology will have these root words, prefix and suffix, that are Latin or Greek based. You might ask me, but why do we need to learn about these root words? Why can't we just learn the medical terms as they are? My answer is because it is efficient. It will save so much time for you to learn medical terminology by learning these prefix, suffix, and root words first, than just to try to memorize all of these hideous medical terms. I am 99% certain the vast majority of doctors and nurses will also do the exactly same and learn medical root words to learn the medical terminology. We haven't done this in a very long time, but do you know what time it is? It is story time, yay! Well, I want to tell you a real story of mine that really made me realize why learning this medical root word is so important. One time, I was on a call and this doctor said, "Sir, we are giving you a pneumococcal vaccine." And to be honest with you, I had never heard of this term pneumococcal before. When you're on a call, you are only listening to this doctor, so I don't know how it is spelled. I don't know what the word is, so I panic. But in the moment, I did remember something, the word pneumo. I had heard that word from somewhere before. That was pneumonia, which is the lung infection. And I remember that something that has to do with lungs will usually have the prefix pneumo. So with this knowledge, I quickly looked up the word pneumo lung vaccine on Google. And there, the first thing that I saw on Google was this. Once I found out about the spelling, it wasn't too difficult to find what the word pneumococcal is in Korean language, and I was able to interpret without interrupting the call flow too much. I know what I just described sounded like it took really long time, but it was actually done literally under 3 or 4 seconds. That is the power of learning the root words for medical terminology, because you will be able to remember what it is about, and it will be a tremendous help when it comes to finding the linguistic equivalents. You will be able to find a lot of resources, especially on YouTube. There are so many videos that have done an amazing job in teaching you. Just simply search up medical terminology root words, and you will have more than enough to study. If I simply leave you here, I think many people will still have questions like this. Hey Mason, there is just too much to learn. Do I need to study everything? Well, my answer is, if you can pass the quiz that I have for you after this video without a problem, then you will be just fine for the exam, in my opinion. Of course, that does not mean that your studying ends there. You might ask, okay, how about the rest? Once I pass the quiz, can I just stop? Or do I need to study more before I start working as an interpreter? You will learn a lot more as you go. As you work as an interpreter, you will encounter various new medical terminology that you don't know. That's when you are going to spend your time and effort to learn the terminology and associated root words as well. You might still ask me, but how about that call? What do I do if I don't know the linguistic equivalence in my language for this difficult medical terminology? Well, what have we done so far? Aha! You remember now, right? We previously learned our skills and tools because it is not possible for us to know everything. And we still need to protect ourselves from misinterpretations. So if you are not able to do what I did with that term pneumococcal vaccine, you can always say, hi, the interpreter is not familiar with the term you just mentioned, pneumococcal. Would you be able to spell it out so that I can quickly look it up and inform your patient? Yes, this will impact our call flow. This will impact our client's call satisfaction, but we are always able to protect ourselves even if we do not have all the knowledge out there. Next, we are going to talk about the medical terms with registers and circumlocution. Indeed, I have mentioned this before. We will revisit this concept and learn more about it. But before that, I have a fun exercise for us to do. Here's the fun exercise or fun game I used to call with my interpreter trainees. This is the game. I would like you to come up with as many English expressions as possible for this. Whether it is in the noun form to our left or in the verb form as a part of speech, if you're not too lazy, try to pause the video and see how many you can come up with without using the dictionary. Okay? I will reveal my answers in 3, 2, 1. There. I mean, there are going to be many different ways, a lot more than what I have here to say this. To have a bowel movement, or going for a number 2, to take a dump using the bathroom, to pass a stool. There are many different ways of saying it, right? Here is another question. If you had to pick the 2 most common or popular expressions that medical professionals use, what do you think they are? I would say, number 1, a bowel movement, and number 2, to pass a stool. As an interpreter, you will hear something like this all the time. Sir, when was the last time you had a bowel movement? Ma'am, were you able to pass a stool this morning? Something like this. If it is for kids, maybe they say something like number 2 or going poo-poo. The reason why I'm talking about this is, of course, once again, the importance of learning a term in many different registers. When it comes to medical terminology, you will have a lot of them. Let me give you some examples. Myocardial infarction. What is this? Do you know what the lower register term for this would be? Before we even get there, let's try to break down this term, since you should have learned some of the medical root words. Here, the prefix myo means it is related to your muscles. The root word cardial or cardio have to do with your heart. And lastly, the word infarction, it just means not getting enough blood, which carries oxygen. So we are basically talking about your heart muscles dying because your heart is not getting enough oxygen, which we often call it a heart attack. So a lower register term of myocardial infarction is the heart attack. How about this? What's an acid reflux? It is when your stomach acid is refluxing, meaning it's going back up your throat, causing this burning sensation in your chest. Any clue how to say this in a lower register? Many call it a heartburn. What about this word? The word is pertussis. Pertussis is a bacterial respiratory illness that is contagious. We often use the lower register term whooping cough because of the high-pitched inhaling sound. I just covered 3 of these new medical terms with register, and perhaps you might have noticed something. These lower register terms often sound like they are named after a common symptom of the higher register term. So it is very easy for people to think, oh, if you have a myocardial infarction, which is your heart muscles dying because there's no oxygen, you have a heart attack. Or you get a heartburn when you have acid reflux. Or a symptom of pertussis is having a whooping cough. But that really is not technically correct. When medical professionals are using these terms, they are being used interchangeably. Myocardial infarction is a heart attack. Acid reflux is a heartburn. Whooping cough is not a symptom of pertussis, it is the pertussis. If you understand the definition of register clearly, you know that these words carry the exactly same meaning. Once again, there are many medical terminology and I cannot cover them all here. In my honest opinion, even if I were to do that, just spending hours making videos telling you medical terms, explaining them, I personally don't think it will come to you the same as it came to me, because I learned those from my experience. And I think this is something that you and I will be doing for the rest of our lives as long as we work as an interpreter. If you don't have this I can do it myself attitude, if you're just thinking, oh, this Mason guy is so lazy, I just want somebody to teach me everything I need to know. Trust me, you are not going to go very far because there is always a limit on that. No matter how much money you pay me or somebody else, they cannot be there for you 24/7, teaching you every single thing. It just doesn't work that way. And it shouldn't. So do it yourself. You can do it yourself because that is what I am teaching you in this video. The fact that you are watching this lecture video is that you are learning something. And as long as you keep learning, you will continue to be a professional interpreter. We also talked about the circumlocution, right? The picture word. I have another story for you, and this one isn't about me, but about another interpreter. I was monitoring this interpreter's call, and the doctor had said, "Sir, please use the bedside commode." In case you're not familiar with the term a bedside commode, it is basically a portable toilet used in the hospital where it is not easy for a patient to move around, so they will have this or a bedpan. When the doctor said the word bedside commode, this interpreter just said, "Excuse me, we don't have that word in my language," and nothing else. I hope by now you can tell me some things that this interpreter is doing wrong. I really hope you know that. First, they didn't say they're the interpreter. Second, they only stated the problem and never provided a solution. This is not how we do things. If the word commode truly doesn't exist in your language pair, what do? We can use the picture word, right? "Sir, please use the portable toilet seat next to your bed." Or the interpreter could have clarified with the doctor, asking what exactly is the bedside commode. I hate to say this, there are still so many interpreters who do not follow these basic protocols and standards. So if you are watching this, I can already tell you, you might have more basic knowledge than many interpreters who have been working years already. Once again, I am not going to spend all of my time trying to tell you every single medical term because that is your responsibility from this moment. However, one thing I did find helpful and effective was to watch medical TV shows. I mean, there are many, like Grey's Anatomy, House, The Good Doctor, New Amsterdam. There are many good ones. I think these can be an excellent help to understand how the hospital works, and you will naturally be exposed to a lot of medical terminology that you didn't know. Here is the last lesson for this chapter, is the common misconception. There are many things that I learned and I am still learning as an interpreter, a trainer, and a QA specialist. Every day as I'm working, I gain more and more knowledge, and you will too. In this lesson, I'm going to share some of the common misconceptions that I found confusing or I saw many people get it wrong. First, shortness of breath versus difficulty breathing. I think many people use these two expressions interchangeably, and indeed, there is no clearly defined difference. However, I have noticed many medical professionals use these two expressions to mean two different things. You will hear nurses or doctors asking the patient, "Do you have any shortness of breath or difficulty breathing?" all the time. When we say shortness of breath or you're short of breath, I believe this means that you are out of breath. Maybe you just ran a mile, you walked up the stairs, you did some vigorous exercises, and you are out of breath. Whereas this difficulty breathing, I think it actually focuses a bit more on not being able to breathe at all. Maybe you're having an allergic reaction and your throat is swelling up, or you're choking on something. You have a severe lung infection that's making it difficult to breathe. So in general, having difficulty breathing sounds a bit more serious to me than being short of breath. There is a higher registered term called dyspnea for being short of breath, which I don't think is the most common medical term that you will hear, but just letting you know. Next is colonoscopy versus endoscopy. When we say colonoscopy, we are talking about putting a tiny camera through your rectum so you can have a look at your colon. You see the name colon and the suffix oscopy, meaning something that has to do with the scope, the camera. And the word endoscopy, endo means inside, meaning using a tiny camera to visually check the inside of your body. So technically speaking, a colonoscopy is just a type of an endoscopy. There are many different types of endoscopy procedures that doctors do, such as colonoscopy, cystoscopy, which is done to check your bladders, and bronchoscopy, laparoscopy, etc. Then, what does this mean when the doctor asks, "Ma'am, have you had a colonoscopy or an endoscopy done in the past?" Is this doctor asking the same thing twice? In this specific context, and honestly, almost all of the time that the medical professional use the word endoscopy to a patient, what they actually mean is the EGD. EGD stands for esophagogastroduodenoscopy. I know it is a hideous word that we definitely do not have to remember, but if you are able to break this down, you will see that it is actually not that difficult to see what this is talking about. Esophago, meaning your esophagus, like your throat. Gastro, which has to do with your stomach. And duodenum, that has to do with duodenum and in your small intestine. And of course, the oscopy that we already talked about. It is very common that elderly patients get both of these procedures done at the same time. So one camera goes through your bottom and the other camera goes through your mouth. So I hope you understand what clients mean when they say colonoscopy and endoscopy in this context. Next is the difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. I think this is honestly one of the most common misconceptions, that many people think they are the same thing. In fact, they are not the same thing. Well, we talked about the heart attack earlier already, and we said the higher registered term of heart attack is myocardial infarction, right? To briefly explain what a heart attack is, we could say your heart muscles are dying because your heart is not getting enough oxygen or enough blood because there is maybe a blockage somewhere in your arteries. This blockage is what we call a blood clot, or a higher registered term of it would be a thrombus. Then what is a cardiac arrest? Also known as a sudden cardiac arrest, this means the electrical system of your heart malfunctions, meaning your heart stops beating. In comparison, generally having a heart attack does not make your heart stop in the moment. But of course, if it is prolonged and left untreated, your heart will eventually stop functioning. I'm sure you have seen this AED sign somewhere, or in the movies or TV shows. You have seen doctors using these defibrillators going, charge to 300, clear, and the body goes boom. Then if the patient is alive, you hear the beep, beep sound on the EKG machine, and if they don't make it, then you hear the long beep sound, which they call it flatlining, right? So that's when the cardiac arrest happens. This can happen for many different reasons. If you're curious, I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. You should do your own research, but I really hope that you are able to now clearly see the difference between the heart attack and the cardiac arrest. Here is another concept that many people misunderstand, is the formulary versus non-formulary. So when we say formulary and non-formulary in a medical setting, it has to do with drugs. But what many people misunderstand is that they misassociate this concept with prescribed medicine and over-the-counter medicine. I think many of you understand the difference between a prescribed medicine and an over-the-counter medicine, the OTC medicine. One, you get it from the doctor. The other, you can go to Walmart and buy it. When I say formulary versus non-formulary, this actually has more to do with your health insurance coverage. Let me try to explain it quickly. Let's say I have a terrible migraine. So I go see a doctor to go get some medicine. The doctor says I can try this medicine A. I basically get a prescription that my doctor wrote and bring it to the pharmacy near my house. When I got there, the pharmacist says this: "Hey Mason, it looks like this medicine A is not on the formulary list." Now, what does this mean? This has nothing to do with the medicine A being prescribed medicine or an over-the-counter medicine. This just means that it is not on the list of medicines that my insurance company will cover. So the pharmacist or the claims representative from my insurance company will let me know what other medications that I can take instead of medicine A that will be covered by my insurance. So putting it as simply as possible, formulary is a list of drugs that your insurance company will cover. Non-formulary, your insurance company will not cover or cover very little, so you have a high out-of-pocket cost. Now you understand the clear difference between a formulary and non-formulary. How would you interpret this if you were the interpreter? If you can find the right linguistic equivalence in your language, then it is simple. If you can't, you know what to do, right? We can use the picture word. Saying the medicine A is not in the drug formulary is the same thing as saying the medicine A is not on the list of medicine your insurance company covers. So understand this concept clearly. Being able to use the picture word when it's necessary is going to be really important and something that we will always be working on as interpreters. Here is another thing so many people just don't seem to get it, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I understand if you do not live in the US, like myself, I live in Canada, and honestly, I never knew what the Medicare or Medicaid was even about until I had to teach myself what these are. If you are working as a contractor interpreter for a LSP, you will most likely deal with some health insurance called for elderly LEPs. That means it will help you a lot if you understand this concept and the differences that I'm about to explain. First thing first, both Medicare and Medicaid are health benefits. It is a program for people so they can get health insurance benefits. Now, the difference between the two is the people. Who is going to get the benefit? Medicare covers seniors, over 65, and people with disabilities. Medicaid, on the other hand, covers people with low income. Another difference would be that Medicare is run by federal. It goes for all US citizens. But the Medicaid, it is a joint program run by both federal and the state. So there are some states that do not participate in the Medicaid program, but many of them do. For example, the biggest Medicaid program is run by the state of California. This program specifically has a name for its own Medicaid benefit called Medi-Cal. I have had so many interpreters who gets this mixed up. Medi-Cal, you hear the Cal part as in California, right? It is not medical. It is not Medicare. It is Medi-Cal, and it is a Medicaid program that is run by the state of California. You will be able to find so many resources everywhere on the internet that explain this so easily and nicely, honestly, way better than I did. Once again, my goal here isn't to teach you the difference between Medicare and Medicaid or what a myocardial infarction means. I want you to see that you have to get curious. When you get a call about Medicare and Medicaid, it is so easy to just be like, okay, I have no idea what this is, but I don't care. When we encounter some difficult medical terminology like subdural hematoma or macular degeneration, we just look up the dictionary and say what that is in our language, and we often don't even bother finding out what that word actually means or what it is about. So I can tell you this habit of being curious and always looking up, doing the research, learning new things, that is what you will be doing a lot as an interpreter. I hope this makes sense.